Well, this morning we're going to look at 3 chapters in the book of Joshua, chapter 10, 11, and 12. Really only chapter 10, 3 verses in chapter 10, but 10, 11, and 12 are going to talk about all the battles, all the struggles that Israel had in order to receive what God had promised them, the inheritance, this land. Israel is, remember how they crossed the Jordan River? That is a valley in between 2 hilly and mountainous areas. The Sea of Galilee is to the north. The Jordan River runs south out of the Sea of Galilee and empties into the Dead Sea. That runs almost straight north and south. That is the eastern border of Israel. The western border of Israel is Mediterranean Sea. There is about 100 miles east and west is Israel. It is about 300 miles north and south, from Syria to the north to Egypt in the south. That's the area that we're going to be looking at. Today, just to give you something to compare it to, North Dakota is about 350 miles east and west, by about 200 miles north and south. So the state of North Dakota is more than twice the size as the nation of Israel in area. The population of Israel today is 8.5 million. Population of North Dakota, 750,000, give or take. So they have about 12 times more people living in half the space that we live in here. Just in case anyone here was really curious and wanted to know. So, this morning we're going to look at 3 things, 3 topics really. One is the relationship that Israel had with the Gibeonites, or what does it mean to be a neighbor or a friend. The second thing is how God showed himself to be God for them. His power, His grace, His mercy in their lives. And really the third thing is how they defeated the enemy. It was because God was on their side. So, Joshua 12:24 states that it took Israel 7 years to battle out the land of Canaan. Joshua fought for 7 years, 31 different kings and nations within that nation of the land of Canaan. That means about every 3 to 4 months there was another battle, another king, another domain, another army set against another struggle. It is like life's struggles. And you can look at that one of 2 ways. Do you go from struggle to struggle to struggle to struggle? And sometimes, like today, there's 5 nations that you're struggling with. So it's not like just one thing at a time, but it's finances and it's relationship, and my health isn't so good, and my neighbor stinks, my boss, not your boss, but some people's bosses stink. And so, we have all those things happening at once, and we're like, when's it going to end? But in reality, it isn't 31 struggles. I look at it as 31 victories in Christ. Okay? That's what I want us to look at. So, there's always going to be a struggle. We live in this world. We live in this realm. We have this flesh. There's always going to come up with something. There's always going to be an attack. And as in our Sunday school, we looked at, if you start opening your Bible, you start reading, you start praying, I can guarantee you the attack is going to increase. Which is like, oh, wow, so I better start praying and reading the Bible because I want more on my plate. You're going to need strength and encouragement, and you're going to need the help of God, and you will always come up on top. There will always be victory in Christ. We don't always get what we want in finances or whatever. We don't always get our wants, but God will give you just enough strength and courage, maybe helper or a friend who will come by your side, something to take over for you. And that way you can encourage others. Do you remember 40 years earlier in the life of Israel, when the 12 spies went out to spy out the land, and they came back with a report, boy, the land was beautiful. It was lush, fruitful plains and orchards and flocks and herds. It was great. It was a great land of milk and honey. But the opposition, the struggle we're going to have, isn't worth taking the land. There's no way we can defeat those people. They've got fortified cities. They've got walled cities. They've got armies that are well-trained, well-equipped. They've got the Anakim. These are giants. These are 8 and 9 foot tall men who are warriors. 10 of the spies said, we're like grasshoppers in their sight. It's impossible to take these people over. They are, again, of course, looking at the appearance, the outward appearance, and forgetting who is on their side. Who brought them to the point of struggle was God himself. They were not willing to fight the good fight. They forgot who God was. God's presence in Israel and in Egypt was something that was not isolated. It was not just a small group of Israelites or prophets that knew the power of God. All of Egypt knew about it. All of the land of Canaan knew about it. They knew of the plagues. They know where these slaves were let go by the most powerful nation, at least in their vicinity, Egypt, was released. They never had a sword. They never had a chariot. They never had horses. They never fought that fight. God fought that fight for them. And you'd like to think that God is just going to go ahead and fight every battle for us so we never have to get our hands dirty. But that rarely happens. Things can happen and extraordinary things can happen and God can do things that are very instrumental. But of those 31 battles that Joshua is going to have, today is the last time you will see a visible, miraculous thing that God does. The next 30, it's just putting on the helmet and the armor and the shield and the sword and the spears and going out there, having to do the work yourself. Okay? You have to do something. God will give you the victory, but you must persist in your relationship with Him. So, let's read chapter 10. And I'm just going to kind of skip. There's some big names in there and some places that you won't know, I don't know. I can't pronounce them very well. So I'm kind of going to skip, or maybe I'd live just a little bit, but you'll get what I mean. Chapter 10, verse 1. Now it came about when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had captured Ai and had utterly destroyed it, just as he has done to Jericho and its king, so that he had done to Ai and its king, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were within their land, that he feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all of its men were mighty warriors. Therefore, Adonai, king of Jerusalem, sent word to 4 other kings, saying, come up and help me, and let us attack Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the sons of Israel. So the 5 kings gathered together and went up with their armies and camped at Gibeon and fought against it. Then the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua to the camp at Gilgal. That's about 20 miles away, Gilgal from Gibeon. Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, for the kings of the Amorites that live in the hill country have assembled against us. So Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the valiant warriors. And the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them, for I have given them into your hands. Not one of them shall stand before you. So Joshua came upon them suddenly by marching all night from Gilgal. And the Lord confounded them before Israel, and he slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and pursued them, and struck them. And it came about as they fled from before Israel, while they were at the descent, that the Lord threw large stones from heaven on them, and they died. There were more who died from the hailstones than those whom the sons of Israel killed with the sword. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord in that day, and the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the sons of Israel. And Joshua said in the sight of Israel, O sun, stand still at Gibeon. O moon, in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation avenged themselves of their enemies. And there was no day like that before it or after it, when the Lord listened to the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Then Joshua and all the Israel returned to the camp at Gilgal. Quite the story. Well, God had the sun stand still. There's a man, there's Joshua, who did not pray in a box, did he? He's like, I want to defeat these people today. And what does he do? He doesn't rely just on the Lord. He's like, God, have the sun stand still. Now, what? Could you imagine that day? I'll be back right after lunch. 24 hours later, you know. What a day that must have been. I looked. I checked. I did the Google search of commentaries on that day. And there's been a lot of things that people have brought in the past, things about NASA. But I found two things of interest. One was from Cambridge University, that some people went and they were studying this day, and they claim that that took place on October 30th, 1207 BC. Don't know how they did that. Couldn't even bother to guess, okay? Somehow they trace things back and they can tell that. What was more interesting is that an archaeologist study claimed that there are writings in the Incas of Peru, the Aztecs of Mexico, the Persians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Chinese, all have in their ancient writings about one day that is extraordinary. Now, they don't have a date and an exact time or anything, but it's interesting to know that way back that other countries all around the world have something about a long day or a spectacular day or a day like no other day. Tells me that God made the earth stand still for a long period of time where people went, what is happening? What is going on? There's something going on. Certainly that would tell me God listens to prayer. God will fight for us as well. So, not just does God hold the sun still, where everyone in the land of Canaan is going to see something amazing is taking place, and the army is going to trying to destroy the enemies of the Gibeonites, but God, and this is kind of a funny picture, is like throwing hailstones down at those people. I don't know if it's one at a time, or if there's like 1,000 angels throwing 1,000 at one time, or how it went, but it was an amazing thing to see, I'm sure. Extraordinary day. That would do a number of things. It would, if I was one of those people in the land of Canaan, the other 30 kings, I would be afraid of the power of God and the people of God. If the people of God said something, I would shudder. I would really believe it is going to take place. It's going to take hold. You believe it because God has done it in the past. He's going to do it in the future. The second thing it would do for me is to remember the thoughts of the people before, 40 years earlier. They were scared because there are struggles in this world. There are monsters. There are giants. There are gulfs. There are people and things and situations that are way beyond us. We're going to run into it. We're going to run into cancer, or unemployment, or something. You know, things happen. Relationships, things that we don't expect, they're going to happen. I am encouraged to know that I'm not going to do it alone. I'm not going to be there alone. I don't even have to fight that fight that is I can't possibly control. That God will go with me. It encourages me. I don't like struggles in my life, but we all have them. And how you overcome those struggles is our testimony. You know our testimony about Christ being with us? You know, a testimony is when you give evidence, or when it is evident in your life. You know, you don't have to go around speaking to everybody. The Israelites did not have to go around telling them about the walls of Jericho falling down. People already knew when they're at their doorstep, watch out for these people, because you know what happened back in Jericho, okay? It was the testimony of others about how God worked in your life that might be very encouraging to them. The Apostle John says, the one who saw it has testified to this, and his testimony is true. He knows he's telling the truth so that you may also believe. John is talking about the life of Jesus Christ. In the Jews, it looks like he was just an ordinary man who tried to say he was God. But to John and a multitude of others, they saw and believed. Or they heard his word and believed. They didn't all see great miracles, by the way. We always think, well, you know, if you raised people from the dead, then I would believe. If you showed me some sign like the sun standing still, well, then I would believe. Then I'll come to church, you know. Then I'll start, you know, my belief in God. But people started believing in Christ when John the Baptist started having people repent. He started paving the way. And Jesus himself giving people word. He never did anything to the woman at the well. He had no great miracle, no great sign, other than he told her, you know, you're not with a husband. You've been married 5 times, and the man you're with is not your husband. That was enough to change her heart, believe that he was God's son, and went out to the village and brought everybody in to hear his words. So we don't need, you know, the sun to stand still. Sometimes you just need the word. How has God changed your life? That's what she did. And it wasn't just 1 or 2. It's not just John who wants to give testimony. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15, 500 men and women witnessed the resurrection of Jesus Christ. During that 40-year period of time, 500 saw him rise into heaven and were waiting for his return. Somehow, from those 500 people, you are sitting in the seat today. Those 500 people took those words, took the testimony and the battles that they were going to have and the struggles they were going to have against the Jews, against the Romans, against pagans and idolatry, and we are the beneficiaries of their struggles today. So we see that there's struggles, there's enemies, but there's going to be struggles, but there's going to be victories. We know that the power of God in our life should mean something to you and should mean something to others. They should see it. They should recognize Israel was different than any other nation. Their God was different than any other God. They couldn't call upon their God to do anything. I mean, they did, but it was all their own individual effort. What started all of this was when Gideon came into Israel. We talked about this last week. They masqueraded themselves, put on dirty old clothes, and they formed an alliance with Israel. We want to be part of your team. We want to be part of your church, your group. We know what God has done in your life. We know about Egypt, and we know about the 2 kings on the other side. What do you say? Can we be friends? Can we have an accord here? Joshua agreed to it. The religious leaders agreed to it. But remember, 3 days later, they found out that they weren't from some foreign country. They lived within the land of Canaan. In fact, they were Gibeonites who just lived 20 miles away from Gilgal. And it said that the multitude was angry at their leadership. How could you do that? Those people are supposed to be destroyed. God told us you're supposed to destroy all of them. But they gave them their word. The relationship was no longer people from the outside. The relationship was someone inside the body. They were grafted in, so to speak, into the vine. So what do you do? What do you do if you were Joshua? And you've made this agreement with these people who aren't family, not even really friends, but you've claimed that you will be their friend, if you will. You are their neighbor, their friend, the person they can rely on. 5 kings come around and they've surrounded their city, and they're going to destroy those Gibeonites unless Israel does something. So if you're Joshua, do you go, you know, if I just waited it out for a while, a few days, maybe those 5 kings would destroy the Gibeonites, and then I could destroy them. That way, the people who were mad at me before, I'll look good to them. I just came a little late. It took us a while to muster the troops and get everybody in line. And so, but I'll tell you what, we'll avenge your deaths by killing everybody. That might be going through some of our heads, right? When something happens in your life, when something happens to somebody that you are aware of, do you wait for somebody else to bail them out? Do you think, well, if they, maybe I should just wait here and see what happens. Maybe they'll call me and ask me for some help. Or do you just extend your hand automatically, knowing that they do need a friend, knowing that they do need somebody in their life, because they are alone. They are in a terrible struggle in their lives. In Joshua's case, he did not hesitate for a moment. His word was, we're friends. We're together. And as soon as he heard it, it says they marched all night. They took a 20-mile march over hills and valleys to get to those people's houses because they needed their help. Because they gave them their word that they would not leave them nor forsake them in their times. That was Joshua. That's what he thought about a relationship with people. That wasn't just Joshua, that was all of Israel. They had to go behind him, and they defeated. And obviously God was for that plan, because God told Joshua, don't even be afraid of those 5 kings. It's a lot of army. Don't even worry about it. I'm with you. I am going to destroy those people with you. It's a done deal. Now, we know people who have struggles. We know people who have been divorced. We know people who have been arrested. We know people who have lost their jobs. We know people who aren't maybe even nice people all the time, right? You probably have someone in mind even. What should you do? How should your relationship change because their struggles are in their lives? Should you just let it go? Well, if they really needed me, they'll come knock on my door. Or should you take the steps and do what you need to do? I want to give you 3 examples. One is from Charlie Brown. Peppermint Patty said to Marcy, I'd like to read a book, Marcy, but I'm kind of afraid. Marcy says, why? Peppermint Patty said, well, I had a grandfather who didn't think much about reading. He said, if you read too many books, your head will fall off. Marcy said, well, you start the first chapter and I'll hold on to your head. Looked like just in case of struggle, she was always there. And that's a friend. I met a man a few years ago. He was a truck driver. Used to leave on Sunday nights or Monday mornings and come back Fridays, afternoons, Friday nights. For 20 years, he was a truck driver. He was married, had a few kids, went to church every Sunday. The church that he grew up in, got married in. Kids got baptized and confirmed in it. One day, it kept gnawing on him, year after year, it kept gnawing on him that he's away so much, so long, that he decided on a Wednesday, you know what, I can't take it another day. I want to quit this job or get some other job. My family my wife, my kids mean more to me than this job. I'll just get something else because I want to be a husband and a father. I don't like being away as much as I have been. Unfortunately, his wife didn't mind him being away. In fact, she would rather him be away. And so when he came home that week, there was struggle right away. Because in his absence, she started going out with a man. Not just any man, his best friend. And by the way, that is not being a good friend. That is what we don't want to do, to be a friend. As bad as all that was, he was divorced, and his wife married his best friend. He's estranged from his children because he hasn't really been in their life very much as it was, and now the wife has kind of got them apart, plus his best friend, right? So what about this man who was very bitter? Telling me the story, he was very angry. He was a minister, he couldn't stand, didn't necessarily want to talk to me, didn't like the church, none of it. And when I asked him why, he told me this story, and I said, but why don't you keep going to church though? Why don't you at least, he said, I'll tell you why. Because throughout this whole thing, everyone in church knew my wife was having an affair. He never told me about it, never said one thing. He said, after we got divorced, I tried to come to church. Nobody said hello. Nobody shook my hand. Not one person called me. Not even the pastor called me and said, hey, how's it going? I bet things are pretty rough. Can we have coffee? Can we come over for dinner? You know, not what? The body of Christ. And so he felt if there was no help from his friends and no help in the church, why even bother? Bitter man. He is, by the way, going to church now. I started talking to him and I got him. Anyway, that was that. The third example, Charlie Brown was the first speaker. Richard Nixon. You guys familiar with Richard Nixon, our president at one time? And he was the only president to resign the presidency. He embarrassed the position of president. He embarrassed our nation. He embarrassed the Republican Party. He was caught up in Watergate of some sort. At least he understood it, or possibly even engineered it, or at least okayed Watergate, the breaking in, infiltrating the Democratic Party. When he was resigned from office, he went to his house in San Clemente, California. No governor went to visit him, no senator went to visit him, no congressman went to visit him, no lobbyist went to visit him, no businessman who helped him get into office visited Richard Nixon. He was such a disgrace. As far as anybody knew, he only had one visitor of note. Billy Graham. Billy Graham visited Richard Nixon on a regular basis. And people couldn't understand it. How could you go visit that man? Don't you know what he did to our country? Don't you know what he did? And when he was asked, Billy Graham said, Richard Nixon was my friend before he was the President of the United States. He was my friend as the President of the United States, and he's still my friend today. Yeah, his situation, Richard Nixon's situation, changed and his struggles. But the relationship Billy Graham had with him never changed, just because he was even an outlaw. Right? If you ever need a friend, that's the time when you're down and out. Not like, oh my gosh, they got the plague on them. Jesus said, Solomon says, we have a friend that is closer than a brother. Do you understand what that is? Being a friend? Being a neighbor? You know what Jesus told his disciples before he died, before he went to the cross? No longer do I call you servants, I now call you my friends. So that yet while we were sinners, he still died for you and for me.